Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
I apologize for people that's going to be offended by it. When I'm in front of the camera, I just don't know how to put it. I believe I'm the best on the planet. I am not worried about anything or anybody. You put the camera in front of me, you put the lights on, I believe I will be a dominant presence in front of anyone's camera. That's just how I feel.
Stephen A. Smith, holy smokes, man. Like, that's one where I feel like the bar is very high. We watch him on TV literally every day, listen to his podcasts, and my only trepidation about it is like, well, what does he have left to say? Turns out a lot. What did you take away from it?
I just resonated with him talking about, his mother, his father, when he talked about opening the fridge and not having any food there. There's so much there, but he's so authentic and he's so confident. And he's 56, Jason, and I really do think that he's entering his prime.
Yeah. This is a guy who basically says, I didn't understand business. I got fired, and I realized I did not understand what was going on behind the scenes. And then he resets and sets about learning that. And now, to your point, he's unstoppable in part because now he gets it.
Well, that part resonates big time with me because him getting fired and my suspension and then the resetting and the lessons learned. But the way I see it, if you fast forward now 15 years for him, is probably the number one most influential voice in sports and almost pop culture, is a trifecta of lessons learned, great relationships, amazing work ethic, and supreme confidence.
Your point about like what he's building is so fascinating because we talked about this notion of where the media is going and how he reacts to it. And I loved his answer when I asked that, which is basically like, I've already figured it out.
And everywhere he goes, he's a pop culture hero. I know that he came to one of the Timberwolves games. He sat next to me, and I thought I was sitting with like Muhammad Ali.
Right.
People in Minnesota love Stephen A. Smith, and I didn't think that was going to happen.
Right.
He is very powerful, and again, he's just getting started.
And he's leveraging that. He's, making $1 million a year, a little bit more, gets fired from ESPN, basically has to go away, come back, only on the radio, not on TV, making $400,000 a year. Fast forward to now, $20+ million annually is most likely what he's going to get.
He's earning every part of whatever that $20 million plus ends up. He's earned every dollar, and he now knows it.
On this episode of The Deal, Stephen A. Smith. All right, so we like to start the show having people introduce themselves. Tell us who you are.
Stephen A. Smith, ESPN, The Stephen A. Smith Show. I guess that says it all for now. That's New York Times best-selling author. I like that one.
Yeah,
like
that's a good one.
That works for me, too.
And a Yankee fan.
Yes. Yes. I love the way they've started off thus far. Soto, I'm very, very pleased. I'm very pleased.
All right, so let's actually start there because you two obviously know each other now.
Yeah.
I believe you're friends.
Yes, we are.
But I dare say that before you knew each other, you knew of each other.
Yeah.
What did you know of him? What did you think of him?
Well, obviously, his baseball career spoke for itself. Obviously, he's had his trials and tribulations, but I always considered him a good dude, somebody that would get in front of the camera, talk to people, was personable, very relatable, tried to be fair-minded and whatever, and was just an outstanding, great player. And so that was the guy that I knew on the baseball field. And I didn't know him in any other capacity at that particular moment in time. And if I don't know you at all, I'm going to be incredibly objective. When I get to know you, I'm going to still be objective in terms of pursuing truth and what have you. But if you're my guy, you're my guy. And I'm going to go out publicly and I'm going to be unapologetic about the fact that this is my guy. And it's not just about being friendly. It's about looking at a person and looking at them for who they are and saying, that's a person I want to be friends with because they're a really good person. And that's how I feel about Alex Rodriguez.
What'd you know about him?
Well, obviously, I knew he was someone that was very respected in my circles, and especially in New York, being a Yankee. One of the things that was endearing was that he was a Yankee fan. So immediately that was a great connection.
Right.
And one thing about Stephen A., and this is kind of when we got to know each other, I went through my tough time in 2014 when I served my suspension, and he was critical about me. So once I talked to him, I asked for his advice. And one thing about Stephen A., if you don't want to hear the truth, don't ask for his advice. And he gave me some tough love, you know. Mm. And that kind of started what I call a very, very good relationship. It's very respectful. And then watching him over the last 10 years, I mean, he had his downtime when ESPN let you go and you came back. I had my downturn on my suspension in the last decade for both of us has been a lot better. But I think the common theme is we come from the bottom. We don't forget where we came from. But more importantly, I think we've learned from some of them. At least I have. I know you have as well, Stephen. And it's just been great to watch him develop to this mega media superstar.
If you think back to your early days, how did those early experiences with your family, decisions you made, decisions that were made for you, how did it affect you as a businessman?
Well, first of all, I was incredibly ignorant to business. But I think for me, if I had to crystallize where business came to the forefront of my mind was when I got fired in 2009. You see, there's a difference between making money and learning business. When you're trying to make money, what you're doing is you're going out there, you're performing, you're praying that some sort of a meritocracy will be in existence. You'll be recognized for your attributes and your production, and ultimately you'll be fairly compensated for it. When you think about business, now you're looking at the entire landscape and you're monitoring what's transpiring, not just before your very eyes, but around you. And you're looking at the stratosphere that you're venturing into or that you're in the midst of. And you're paying attention to the tea leaves. You're paying attention to what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. Because when I got let go by ESPN due to a contract dispute, it was an incredibly humbling experience. I went from having 4 jobs to 0 in one meeting, just like that. I didn't think it was fair. I didn't think it was right. I thought I got hosed. I thought I got screwed over big time. And I was very, very upset, but I was overwhelmed, not just with sorrow, but with fear, because as I was driving home from Connecticut back to Hollis, Queens, New York, to my mom's house, I pulled over on the side of the road and I just put my head in my hands because I was like, I've lost everything. And I had no game plan. I had no plan B. I had walked around thinking that folks yelling my name, screaming my name, seeing me in commercials, I'm on TV, I'm popular. Boom. This is who I am. This is what I'm worth. I had no knowledge, no clue whatsoever of what my true worth was because I wasn't attached to anything that was perceived as being a revenue generator.
Right.
And if I didn't have knowledge about my business, then they got to define my worth, not me. And so as a result, when I wanted X amount of dollars and they said I wasn't worth it, I couldn't prove to them that they were wrong because I had no platform or no evidence, no data whatsoever that validated that. And I didn't know that until they let me go. And when they let me go and I went about the business of licking my wounds and then ultimately trying to resurrect my career, what I zeroed in on was mastering the business that I was in. And ultimately positioning myself where I would be able to define my worth. And lo and behold, I've had 3 contracts since. And I think it's fair to say that I've kind of figured stuff out a little.
And another one coming, by the way.
Another one coming. My contract ends in June of 2025. I'm sure we'll be talking before then. And hopefully things will work out. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's business. And that's something that I believe I'm going to be prepared to handle. Let's just say this. This ain't 2009.
Stephen, I do want to go back because we do share a lot in common.
Yeah.
More than the pinstripes.
Yes.
The fact that we both fell and my suspension, your firing. But what lessons did you learn?
I don't think I'd be where I am today. I was arrogant, and I was the worst kind of arrogant because I was stupid while I was arrogant. When I say I was arrogant, I never mistreated people. I'm never inhumane. What I'm talking about is just an overwhelming level of confidence in who I am and what I do in this business. And I'm one of those guys, and I am to this, for better or worse, I apologize for people that's going to be offended by it. When I'm in front of the camera I just don't know how to put it. I believe I'm the best on the planet. I am not worried about anything or anybody. You put the camera in front of me, you put the lights on, I believe I will be a dominant presence in front of anyone's camera. That's just how I feel because I'm that comfortable with it. And so for me, having that attitude, I thought that was all I needed because people knew me and they screamed my name in the streets. But you got to be educated about your business, about the business at hand. Do you generate revenue? That's what business is about. And I realized that I was a victim of being a newspaper person because so many newspaper people pay no attention to business. They pay attention to the affinity they have with the audience and what's reciprocated. And they will let that speak for them because for years, that's what it did. But the advent and the introduction of sports talk radio and then ultimately television, of course, it was always there, but especially in this day and age, debate format, ultimately the podcast stratosphere. There's so many different avenues, not to mention social media and how that could potentially be monetized because I don't care how good your product is. If people ain't buying it, money ain't being generated. If money ain't being generated, bodies are going to fall because they don't have the revenue to pay the folks that are producing. And when you deduce things from that simplistic perspective, it goes a long way towards humbling you. And then there's the black element. As a black man, it's very, very important that I say this. The more knowledgeable I became, the more I learned to depersonalize things. When I was let go in 2009, I'm a black man. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. They're going to let me go. They wouldn't do this to the white guy. That was the mentality. Until my mother, as I wrote in my book, Straight Shooter, looked at me and gave me a tray with some bagels and eggs and some tea and put a handheld mirror in front of me. And she said, I'm just wondering when you're going to look at yourself. She said, this ain't about all of that. It's about you. You were the one complaining. You were the one talking about your bosses that way. You were the one lamenting the state of affairs at work and all that stuff. She said, I'm not saying you should have been fired, but would you have wanted you working for you at that time, the way that you were? She said, I'm saying it's time to look at yourself. If she hadn't told me that, I would have kept licking my wounds and thinking that it was them instead of me. And I think that once I became more knowledgeable about the business, the biggest lesson I learned is that all of a sudden you depersonalize stuff because you can see why certain decisions are made. And all of a sudden it makes sense. So if you ESPN and you expected to generate about 50 million in revenue, but you only generated 30, well, that would explain why I got less. But if you got more, it would also explain why I'm asking for more. You see what I'm saying? And so, what's it going to be? And that's the mentality. And that's what I've learned. The biggest lesson I learned was the importance of mastering my business, not just from a negotiating standpoint, not just to empower myself as a talent, but as a man, learning to separate emotion from business.
And so the key thing that happens in your sort of resurrection journey, as it were, is Dave Roberts comes to you, right?
Yes.
What gave him such confidence in you?
Dave Roberts, everybody knows he and I are very, very close.
Of course.
I love him dearly. He is an absolute nightmare to work for. If you are not 1,000% committed to winning. This man lives, eats, and breathes winning. He is not a pleasant person to be around if you are losing. He is dogged about it. And there's one talent he believes that is like him. And you're looking at him. I'm not, if I lose, I lose. I'm not going to sleep well. I'm not going to rest. I'm not going to drop in the ratings and stand still and accept that. I'm not going to, be near the top of the heat and not shoot for the top. I'm not going to be at the top and settle. I'm not built like that. And he knows, and he always said, you're a machine. And, he got that from a story Mark Shapiro tells. And Mark Shapiro, again, is the president, over there at William Morris Endeavor. And Mark Shapiro, when he
brought you into ESPN.
He brought me into ESPN in 2003. He was told at the time, hey, Rod, he was like, who's this guy, Stephen A? I'm at Fox Sports at the time. Kevin Frazier, who's the host of Entertainment Tonight, who was once at ESPN. That's one of my buddies. He and I have been friends for 30 years. And he was working on NBA Shoot-Around is what it was called at the time. And he went to Mark, he said, this is what we need. Mark's like, who's this guy? Kevin said, the best. You have to get him. And according to Shapiro, he had 25 direct reports. And he went into a meeting and asked what everybody thought about me. And every single individual in that room said, hell no, don't bring him here. He's not our cup of tea. We don't want him. He's not for us. He's for them. Do not bring him here. Everyone except Norby Williamson. He was indecisive. What do you want to do? I guess he's worth the chance. I don't know what you want. But everybody else was an emphatic no. And Shapiro said, I've never seen anybody have such universal dissension against them in a meeting like this. Get him here for an audition. I want to see him. I'll go up there for an audition. And 18 different people interviewed me.
Wow.
And the last was a guy by the name of Mike McQuaid, who's an exceptional senior coordinator producer at ESPN for years. And he looked at me and all he said to me was, you're at Fox and that's cool, but, essentially compared to us in the world of sports, right? They're the little fish. We the big fish. He said, you the big fish in the little pond. How you going to feel about being the little fish, the little fish in a big pond? And I looked around and I said, I mean, no disrespect to anybody, but I ain't going to be no little fish in anybody's pond. Turn the lights on, put on the camera and watch me do what I do. And he said, all right, let's go. And he put me in the studio. It was at 2:15 p.m. At 2:45 p.m. we finished. At 3 o'clock, I was on the road heading back to New York. At 3:30, my agent at the time called me and said, we just agreed to a 3-year deal for ESPN. Wow. Mark Shapiro and them was watching, and he called it the greatest audition he had ever seen. And that's how it started.
And so I do want to go back to that moment where you come back, because you start this rebuild. Mm-hmm. It's clear then, and you've described it in talking about Dave, it's clear that you had a much, I don't know if you had a better grasp, but you had more focus on the numbers and what you had to deliver. Is that fair?
Yes.
And so where does it go from there? How do you build that sort of business and sort of almost analytic foundation to take the next step?
Well, first of all, you have to assign yourself. And I talked to an A-Rod about this. I was like, listen, man, you're going to do baseball. This is a beautiful thing. Because obviously this man is a savant when it comes to the diamond. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, the games, live events, that's always a winner. You're a part of that. You're winning, right? If you're not a part of that, what do? You can make all the SportsCenter appearances in the world, to use ESPN as an example. But if you ain't hosting the show, nobody knows when you coming on. One day is one analyst, another day is another analyst, another day is somebody else. So it's not appointment viewing. That means what happens is ultimately they could deduce what the number is, and they don't necessarily have to attribute it to you because you're not a consistent presence on the show. As a result, they get to dilute your impact, therefore dilute your worth. And as a result, say to you, hold your horses in terms of what you think you're worth. This may not necessarily be so. So when Skip Bayless came to me, and Skip Bayless was like, hey, man, I need you on the show. I'm getting my ratings and what have you, but to do something with somebody every day, it needs to be somebody I know I can trust, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I had to pay attention to and ultimately had to heed was that that's 5 days a week, every day, 10 a.m. That means the audience knows exactly where to find me, which means that if these ratings jump up, there's no way they can deny the impact that I had because I'm right there. And so because of that, I went to the show. We skyrocketed to number 1 on ESPN2. Okay. We were doing the unthinkable. We were beating some of the sports centers in ratings, which is something that, the elder statesman in the business was swearing we would never be able to do. And then from that point forward, it was just calculative measures that took place along the way. Skip Bayless was ultimately going to leave because he was going to get offered a boatload of money from Fox. I had dreams of making sure that we transition from ESPN2 to ESPN1 because ESPN1 always has more viewers. So if we're right there, that's definitely going to facilitate us grasping a larger audience. As those larger numbers come in, all of a sudden, here we are. And who's the constant? You've got Skip Bayless, he's in, he's out. You got Max Kellerman, he's in, he's out. You've got Kerry Champion, you've got Molly Karam, you've got all of these contributors. Who's the one constant?
Right.
Stephen A. Be that one constant.
I don't want to get too far away, though, from that initial decision, though, to pair with Skip, because I think the three of us can agree that fundamentally changes sports media. You and Skip had a relationship. You had seemingly dissimilar backgrounds, but actually when you peel it back, you're both incredibly hardworking journalists at the core. Because if we think about deals, that's probably one of the best deals you do is getting into a partnership with Skip Bayless.
Skip Bayless is insane, and I'm not. Let's get that out the way. And I say that affectionately, and he knows what story I'm going to tell. It's 2005. Bob Lee is hosting Sports Centers on Sunday morning, the great Bob Lee. And in hosting those sports centers, there was a segment, okay? Old school, new school. They had talked about it. Bob Lee ultimately took a hold of it and had Skip and I on. And we're in separate rooms in a studio right here in Midtown Manhattan. And Skip would say outlandish things, sometimes of what people thought were outlandish. And some athlete got in trouble. And Skip Bayless goes on national television on a Sunday morning at 11 a.m. to be exact. And this man says, no athlete should be allowed outside after 11 p.m. He said nothing good happens at nighttime. Nothing good happens at night. Every athlete in their contract should have an 11 p.m. curfew. And I'm literally laughing. And I'm like, how old are you, Skip? How old are you? You have lost your mind, you know? And so we finished the segment and we come out of our separate rooms. And I was like, man, that was hilarious, man. That was funny. Way to go, man. And he looked around, he's leaned into me. He said, I'm serious. He said, no athlete should be allowed out after 11 o'clock. There's nothing good that comes from being out after 11 o'clock at night. And that's when I knew if we ever paired, it's going to be big time.
Yeah.
Because I naturally thought nothing like him. Naturally, he thought nothing like me. We were polar opposites. It wasn't something that had to be manufactured.
So, Stephen, that was then.
Yes.
This is now.
Yes.
You've had multiple co-hosts.
Yeah.
I love what you guys do on Mondays and Tuesdays during football and all of that. The question is the rating wars.
Right.
Who's winning now?
It was me. You know?
Close?
Not even close. And I don't say that with joy, believe it or not, because I want to win. I want to be number one. But I think a couple of weeks ago, we won by a 10-1 margin. It's been very, very lopsided. And I take no joy in saying that because I want Skip to be successful. I'm going to always be grateful for what he did to me. Keyshawn Johnson's a friend of mine. Michael Irvin is a friend of mine. You know, Richard Sherman is a friend of mine. I'm not rooting against these guys. I just want to be number one. But, you know, First Take is definitely it. This is at a time when linear television, you know, is dwindling, shows are getting canceled. We're going up in the ratings. I literally had a conversation with the bosses like, look, if I'm going to continue to do this show, it can't be about that because now I'm competing against myself. I'm proud to say that I wake up every day with two thoughts in my mind. How do I make my bosses more money? And how do I get some of it? I can say stuff like that about being at ESPN because I know I don't show up to work thinking about just myself. I show up to work thinking about facilitating success for the company. And so I want all of these guys to succeed and these ladies. I see, you know them all. You see them all every day. Anything they need from me, I'm happy to do it. The bosses need something from me. I'm happy to do it. I'm here to win for all of us. So, but I'm not going to apologize for wanting to win for me too.
Right. And so that leads to, I think, a fascinating conversation about this moment that we're in that you're addressing directly, Stephen, which is the media landscape is radically changing. Even the business model there at ESPN is changing. You think about, you know, Logan Paul, you think about Pat McAfee, you think about Dude Perfect, licensing content to ESPN.
Right.
This world is going to change. How do you ensure that you change your business with it?
I've already done it. The Stephen A. Smith Show is owned and operated by me. Has nothing to do with ESPN. You have people, and respect to everybody who does it, because it's a money-making business, the podcast stratosphere that we live in. Props to you guys for doing what you're doing. I'm proud of everything that I see, and I want everybody to succeed. But when you look at those guys, they have podcasts. I have a show. What do I mean by that? I came out of my own pocket and I built my own television set in my own television studio. I'm trying to produce content for linear television and the streaming stratosphere. I can sit up there 1 minute and I'm doing a 30-minute sports show. Another minute, it's an hour show on politics that can go up against Real Time with Bill Maher at a daily show or something like that. You look at the set, you might peek at it and say, man, this looks like a late night show. Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel. Yes, it's true. Hell, I could do something for Bloomberg News if I knew as much as y'all did about business. Okay, I'm just saying that for me, that's what I'm after.
Yeah.
I wasn't out to do a podcast. Everybody else was doing a podcast, number one. And number two, I didn't need to necessarily do that.
Right.
Because even though the landscape is changing, I'm still winning in linear television. And by the way, it's winning in streaming, because you have to remember, there is such a thing called ESPN YouTube. People can talk all the stuff that they want about the, ESPN's in less households. It was 100 million, and then it dipped to 89, and then 82, and then down to 71. What they're leaving out is that the audience hasn't left ESPN. They're just watching it differently. Right. iPads, smartphones, laptops, etc. And oh, by the way, in my first year doing the Stephen A. Smith Show on YouTube, which is separate and apart from all of that, I already have 614,000 subscribers, averaging over 8 million views per month. So I'm just getting started. My attitude is I've already adjusted. Right. It's just a matter of what I'm going to be incentivized to do. I'm not going to be apologetic about this. I want to, and I intend to get paid. Right. But in the same breath, I also want to be somebody that, whether it's ESPN and Disney or someone else, looks at and has faith in to help build, find different talent, scout and evaluate, create different shows and different platforms for content. I want to be one of those guys as well.
Stephen A., one of the things that we also have in common is our great friend and mutual mentor, Mark Shapiro. What did you learn from Mark Shapiro?
Mark and I have a special relationship. It's rare, and I'm just going to say it plain, to be a black man from the streets of New York City. It is rare that you find yourself in a position to have the kind of relationships that I've been blessed and fortunate enough to have. And Mark Shapiro is certainly up there with some of the great relationships that I've had. He's a businessman, make no mistake about it. He does not always deliver me good news. We do not always agree, and we will butt heads. And if you don't know us, you'll be like, what the hell is wrong with them? Why do they talk to each other like that? What you don't understand is that we can talk to each other like that and be like, all right, man, I'll meet you for dinner in an hour. All right, man, I'll see you next Tuesday. We're going to the Knicks game together. All right. When you have somebody like Mark Shapiro in your life, I just can't say enough of you. He's alive. He's energized. He's constantly swinging for the fences, and he goes for it. And it's pretty impossible to be in his presence and be somebody who's complacent, who doesn't want to work hard, and who doesn't care about results. If you're trying to win, you don't mind being around him. And he is the only, I love Ari Emanuel as well. We've had a great relationship for years. But I unapologetically tell anybody, I'm at William Morris Endeavor because Mark Shapiro is there. It's a personal relationship that I've had with him for over 20 years. He is the man that hired me when he was going to Six Flags, when he was going running Dick Clark Productions, when he was, all of these years that he was away from me, he would still call and provide input and do what he could to protect me or to elevate me. He's always had my back, and I've always appreciated that.
We talked a bit about Mark Shapiro, and if you haven't listened to our episode with him yet, go back and check it out. Coming up, we discuss how Stephen A. went from a local journalist to the face of ESPN. plus how mentorship and accountability played critical roles in his success. And so as we talk about sort of mentorship and guidance, one very clear through line in your book are these series of, and they are mostly men in your life. And often they are men of color, Black men who, whether it's Big House Gaines, your coach at Winston-Salem, whether it's Dave Roberts, but even thinking about John Thompson, thinking about John Chaney, what role did they play and how does that act differently from a mentorship perspective? I am notably asking this as the white guy sitting here for you.
Well,
because there's an activism thread there too that I think comes into or worldview.
You could say activism and you wouldn't be far off, but it's really not about that. Instead of activism, I'll use another word with the letter A, accountability. These are pioneers from the Black community that toiled through the terrain in a very, very significant way, created and provoked change, made differences, and ultimately had to confront hardships that weren't given to the typical person out in this world. You, John Thompson, you had to go through a lot to get to where you are. You, John Chaney, you had to go through a lot to get to where you are. And for me to be in the position that I'm in, let's not forget Sonny Hill in Philadelphia. Can't forget him. Can't forget Rob King, the former editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer, the great Bryant Gumbel and the path that he paid. I grew up admiring Ed Bradley, although I didn't have the pleasure of meeting him, God rest his soul, former 60 Minutes reporter. You see iconic figures that come from your community. There's a standard they established. And when they come to you and they approach you and they're talking to you about things, here's what you have to remember. They're talking to you for a reason because they believe you have the potential to do and accomplish the things similar to what they did. And they're letting you know there's a responsibility that comes with it. There's an expectation. Reverend Jackson came up to me with that one time. Al Sharpton came up to me with that one time. I got a call from Barack Obama one time. That came, throughout the years, you see people coming up to you, and it's something in my mind that I appreciate greatly because it reminds me that it's not just about me. Excuse me, you're here, be mission-minded. You ain't here for just a check. You ain't here just to do a good job and go home. You don't get to do that because you have the power to influence lives. Therefore, you have a responsibility to strive to do so in a very positive way. And if it's with a hard truth, so be it. But you're doing it for the right reasons. And so to me, that's the difference. And I've often said this because there are white individuals that I've looked up to, that I've admired for many, many years, and that I've talked to on a constant basis that's given me advice, counsel, tools. One of those people that I talk to religiously that I love very dearly is Bob Iger. I have never, nor will I ever, ask Bob Iger for anything but advice. You do not leverage relationships like that. This man and what he did to take me under his wing, to care about me enough just to give me guidance, was a big thing. He didn't have to do that. I'm not going to, I could leave ESPN this year. I got nothing negative to say about that man. That's my guy.
What kind of advice did Bob give you?
He gave me a boatload of advice. He also he reminded me about the importance of business, not to take things personal, to educate yourself about what you need to educate yourself about so you don't take things personally, so you don't personalize it in a fashion that compromises your ability to perform. And then also understanding you don't always have to give in to this need to fight every battle and to come out swinging. You don't take relationships like that and leverage that for something more. You do what you do because other opportunities will always be available to you when you're learning from wise individuals.
Stephen A., I know you've interviewed everyone from like Michael to Magic. As a young Black man coming up, watching these guys from afar, writing about them in Philly and Daily News, who are some of the people that you've admired that have given you advice and that you sound like Michael Jordan and Kobe when you're talking about, I want to be number one. But how did they influence you both from afar and now as friends or mentors?
Well, when you're great, when you speak, folks have no choice but to listen if they want to win. And you know, you're sitting here doing this podcast. Here's the reality of the situation. No matter what you've been through, there's no doubt that greatness was in your career. So when you suited down, I'm sitting in Minnesota with you, you got your black suit on, and I'm like, this brother's an owner for the NBA team. You know what I'm saying? This brother's going to own an NBA team. I'm loving this right now. Earned, not given, you know, because you made smart decisions along the way. Every decision wasn't wrong. You made a lot of wise decisions, a lot of smart decisions. The Kobes of the world, the MJs of the world. I mean, people like that, you know, you just watch guys and you watch them work. And most of the time I'm watching rather than asking because I'm a pretty keen observer. And so when I think about a guy like Kobe, 2005, 2006, Kobe Bryant, trial and stuff is over. He settles the case. He's back. He's playing ball. Never stopped. And he's doing interviews, you know, he's still talking to people after games and stuff like that, but he never sat down and gave it one-on-one to anybody. And then he gave it to me. And he comes into the Quite Frankly Studios. That's the name of the show back on ESPN 2 from 2005 to 2007. And I was sitting there like, yo, man, people like my interviews. They like the set. They telling me, you know, I'd be like Oprah. And his exact words was, F Oprah. Harpo. I don't want to hear Oprah again. You insult her when you say Oprah. Harpo. She owns the Oprah Winfrey Show. She owns her own brand. That's what I want for you one day. And that's what he said to me, which is why, even though I loved him so much and we were pretty tight for a media member to a player, it broke my heart when he passed away in that helicopter accident because I was with him 3 weeks earlier on New Year's Eve. Hugged one another, talked with one another. We were partying together New Year's Eve, and we were talking about doing something together for ESPN because he knew that I was about to start my production company and I was aiming to make things happen. So he was a guy that I just considered to be a savant, just a brilliant, brilliant mind. And then when it comes to just elements of winning, what touched me about The Last Dance with Michael Jordan was that Michael Jordan said things in The Last Dance that Michael Jordan had been telling me for years. And so I'm watching him and he was like, you might have, and the part where he got really, really emotional and he called for a break. And he was like, you may have a problem with me, but that's because you never won anything. You know, he was talking to whoever he was talking to, the sacrifices that come with it. You didn't do this. You know, you didn't know what it took. You didn't know what it took to get to this point, the sacrifices that were made. And I take all of that and I look at my life. I've got 2 daughters. I got 4 older sisters. Both my parents passed away in 2017 and 18 respectively. And I've got 15 nieces and nephews. And there's a lot of moments that I've missed. I don't have regrets about that. It had to be done. We want welfare, government cheese and bread. Didn't spend long on it, but we starved. I know what rats and roaches in the house look like. I know what it's like to open the refrigerator and there be absolutely, positively nothing in there. I know what it's like to walk around starving. I know. I've been there. And I'm like, I'm never going back. And my daughters will never experience that. And my sisters are done experience that. And my nieces and nephews ain't experienced that. Whatever I got to do to be great enough to ensure that we don't have those concerns, I will do. And if that means that they get to spend Christmas and Thanksgiving together, but I got to be on the road at work. I got to be traveling. I got to be at a game. I got to sacrifice time, that family time. Yes, it hurts. No, I don't like it. But I know what the alternative is in my world. And the alternative has always been something unacceptable for me. And I'm just not going there. So it's a decision I made a long time ago, and I don't look back from it.
And to that end, you know, as Alex has alluded to, you're on the verge of being almost certainly the highest paid sports commentator in the business. In your book, you talk about your late brother. He visualized that for you. he manifested it. Or he visualized it.
2 months before he died.
You manifested it. So as you think about that, I know you think about him a lot, and what's happened in those intervening years, were you always confident this is where it would end up?
Oh, no. I wasn't confident that it would end up where I am today. I thought that I would be successful. I thought that I would be pretty good, if not great. I thought that you would respect me, you would see me, you would know me, but I never thought I would be in the position that I'm in right now. I'm in a position right now where I literally, I tell him, my pastor has a podcast, and he had me on the other day, and it's always nervous being around him because I'm trying to get there, you know. I'm trying to get there. You know? I'm not quite there yet, but I'm like, Pastor, I'm trying. I'm really trying, you know. And he's known me for 30 years and knows everything about my life inside and out because he's my spiritual father, and I confide in him about a lot of things. Thinking about your question, he asked me the same thing, and I said, I knew I'd be successful, but I didn't know this would happen. Yeah, we talk about I could be the highest paid. Well, let's talk about that for a second. ESPN has done nothing wrong to me in that regard. When I signed my contract years ago, I was the highest paid then.
Yep.
They treated me right. Things just happened. You know, other folks came down the pike. Mm-hmm. Pat McAfee kicking tail in the YouTube stratosphere, over 2 million followers. Built the show over 7 years. He deserved what he got. Troy Aikman and Joe Buck are institutions. Mm-hmm. They deserve what, I can't even express to you what it is to have them. Troy Aikman, I respect the hell out of Joe Buck, but I don't really know him. I love me some Troy Aikman. That's my brother. I love Troy Aikman, you know, and he's phenomenal. You know, you think Kirk Herbstreit's been there for years. You think all of these other guys, they've been there for years. It was their turn. The only reason I ever answered any questions about me being the highest paid, it was me saying, hello, it's my turn. You know, my contract's coming up. Mm-hmm. I've been number one. I was number one then. I'm still number one now. And ain't too many dudes that's 56 years of age, 20 years in the television business. That's number one for the last 12 years. And when I say number one, I'm talking about every week and every month and every year for 12 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I feel. But that doesn't mean that ESPN's wrong or Disney is wrong for feeling otherwise. If you feel otherwise, you feel otherwise. Then I'll have to find somebody who does feel like I feel.
Right.
And, you know, we'll go from there. But the biggest thing for me is that people try to act and they'll try to pit it like it's going to be some negotiating war. No, it's not. This is what I bring to the table. Do you value and appreciate me enough to give me what I think I deserve or not? If you don't, I respect that. I hope you respect the fact that somebody else might. Mm. And we go from there. But so many times people think that I'm talking about ESPN. I'm not talking about ESPN. I'm talking about the business. I'm talking about everybody. Hello, we live in America. I thought this was capitalism. I thought we tried to inch as close to meritocracy as we possibly could. I thought we were about winners. If you're going to pay folks, isn't it supposed to be people who would win for you? They didn't pay him to lose. They didn't pay Derek Jeter to lose. They didn't pay Michael Jordan to lose. I don't recall that. You get paid to win. I've won. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have to keep winning. I understand the responsibility that comes along with it. But what I'm saying to the industry, when I got let go in 2009, y'all left me for dead. You thought I was done. I'm not talking about, again, Disney is, I'm talking about contemporaries in the business. The articles they were writing, the smack they were talking, they were writing my epitaphs. Talking major nonsense. And it's okay because you were doing your job and you have a right to your opinion. And based on the facts at that particular moment in time, I got to give you credit for deducing that was the situation and that was your opinion. Well, what you going to say now? Because I'm here. And by the way, I'm 56. And I'm coming. I'm not done. I lost 40 pounds. Cholesterol level dropped by 100 points. Insulin resistant levels from 27 to a 2. Body fat from 29.4 to 10.4. I'm not messing around. I'm on a mission.
You look like you're 46, not 56.
I appreciate that. I think I look a little younger than that.
But I'll take it. Stephen A., one thing that, like Nick, my nephew, is an enormous fan of you, like other millions of young people, right? But they forget Stephen A., the writer in Philly that wasn't making millions and millions of dollars. Right. My question to you is, how much did being a writer help you being so good on television?
Everything, because it provided substance. It got me addicted to having something to say. When you're a columnist, you have to wake up every morning and you have to be about the business of what is the most attractive story to write about today? What will compel and ingratiate you with the reader? Okay. And do you have interesting content to provide? In some cases, 3, 4, 5 times a week. Can you do that? When they call me Screaming A, I listen carefully. I don't mind you saying I'm loud. I don't mind you pointing to me being bombastic and demonstrative on occasion. What I mind is if I sense you're utilizing that stigma to evade or omit my career. That I will not tolerate. I was in those press boxes. I was in those clubhouses. I was in those locker rooms. I traveled on the road over 225 days a year covering the Philadelphia 76ers. I did that. And the NBA playoffs and the NBA finals. And prior to that, I was covering college sports. And prior to that, I was covering high school sports. I was the one that started out as an intern for the Winston-Salem Journal. And then I went over to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And then I went to the Greensboro News and Record, where I'm literally working from 8:30 to 6 p.m. every day doing calendar items, school lunch menus, and all of this other stuff. And then from 7 p.m. to midnight, I worked for free covering prep sports in the Piedmont Triad area in North Carolina. They wouldn't pay me because they had no money. So I used it because I wanted the experience to generate bylines so I could build my portfolio and ultimately get a job in this business. I'm the one that started out at the New York Daily News as a reporter. From April of 1993 to August of 1993, I had to cover homicide. This is the stuff I've done. So when I'm sitting there and I'm looking at people and they're talking like, he's loud and he's bombastic, he's demonstrative, I'm looking at them like, you kiss my ass. Excuse my language, but you can do that. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to ignore and erase that I did what you did to get here.
All right, Stephen A. Smith from New York. There's so many young people out there that admire you, look after you, watch your journey. If they want to be the next Stephen A. Smith, what advice would you give them?
Be committed to the work and the journey, not the results. Forget the sizzle, because all that glitters ain't gold. You got to be about the work, because ultimately that's going to be your saving grace. The work that you're willing to put in, the sacrifices that you're willing to make, the fact that you're not addicted to the glitz and glamour. It ain't all it's cracked up to be. Keep in mind, when I got let go in 2009, everybody knew. So being known and being a celebrity and, being this, everybody knew. When I fell flat on my face, when I failed, when my epitaph was being written and I was considered done in this industry, everybody knew. My name was paraded all over the place. That wasn't fun. So don't be too high. Don't get too low. Be as even keel as you possibly can. Exercise humility, have that inner confidence, because they're going to come to you and they're going to try to break you down. Because especially in this day and age, with the advent of social media and everybody feeling like they have a voice, criticism is more prevalent than ever before. We have to understand that in today's society, on far too many occasions, folks' definition of success is bringing you down to their level because they can't elevate themselves to yours. And when you understand that, and then you be about the business of doing your job, mastering your craft, and committing yourself to being the best at what you do on an everyday basis. Every day is a new day. You got to get up and do it again. When you commit yourself to that, you're on your way. If you're looking for shortcuts, just get out the way now, because you ain't gonna win. If you're looking for shortcuts, you ain't gonna win. You will fall.
Love that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen A.
Appreciate it.
The Deal is a production from Bloomberg Podcasts and Bloomberg Originals. The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly. Our producers are Victoria Veyes and Lizzie Phillip. Our story editor is Siddhartha Mahanta. Our assistant producers are Stacey Wong and Cale Brooks. Blake Maples is our sound engineer. Rubab Shakir is our creative director. Art direction is from Jacqueline Kessler. Original music by Blake Maples. Casting by Dave Warren. Our managing editor is David Ravella. Our executive producers are Sage Bauman, Jason Kelly, Adam Comiskey, Brendan Noonan, Kelly LaFerriere, Ashley Honig, Trey Shallowhorn, Kyle Kramer, and Andrew Barden. Additional support from Rachel Scarmazino, Elena Sasangelis, Anna Mazarakis, and Randall Williams. Joshua DeVoe is our director of photography. Camera operation by Jesse Ridner, Billy Boyerman, and Natasha Abelard. Our gaffer is Rob Silcox, and our grip is Pranoy Jacob. Our production assistant is Diana Colung. Alex Diakonis is our video editor. You can also watch The Deal on Bloomberg Originals, YouTube, and Bloomberg Television. Subscribe to The Deal wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.